In this video, we'll talk briefly about selecting parts on the nest, then we'll cover several useful tools that will help you manually nest parts more efficiently. So in ProNest LT, you can select parts on the nest by just clicking them. Okay, you can also select multiple parts by holding the Shift key and clicking. Okay, another way of selecting parts is to click and drag a selection box. So right click and then drag a box. And when I right click from left to right, as I've done here, all the parts within this box will be selected, but anything not completely in the box will not. So this base plate part will not be selected. Okay, but if I do the same thing, if I right click the box from right to left this time and leave it right here, it's going to select every part. So when I do it this way, any part that's in contact with that selection box will become selected. Okay, so that's just a little trick. You can also press Control A to select everything on the nest. Now let's talk about some manual nesting tools. The first is called Duplicate. So in ProNest LT, you can select a part, and then there's a Duplicate button here on the Parts tab. As long as there's a sufficient quantity in the part list, when I click Duplicate, it will copy the current part at its current rotation angle and then dock it to the cursor. So it will turn on anchor part to cursor. At this point, I could just click to nest copies of that part at that angle. Okay, this also works with a multiple selection, and you can use dissimilar parts. So let's say you have an arrangement of parts that you like here. So I have these two parts. Again, I can right click here to select them, click Duplicate, and then that selection will become docked to the cursor again. It will be anchored to the cursor. Okay, so I could just click to nest. We'll clear out some of these parts now. There's also a feature called Mirror. Any part can be flipped either horizontally or vertically. This can be used in cases where it doesn't matter which side of the part is facing up. So let's say I have this foot part here. I could mirror this. First, I need to set the mirror property to either. Then just select the part. And again, in the Parts tab, I can mirror this horizontally or vertically. Okay, so you can see the result there. Another useful manual nesting tool is called Cluster. With Cluster, you can create a group of nested parts and then nest them together as if they were a single part. So let's look at that now. I'll add Arc Trap here. I can do this with multiple copies of the same part. So just bump these. I'll select them. On the Parts tab, select Cluster. And now my cluster has been added to the part list. And this can be nested just like any other part. Okay, so I can double click or click and drag. And then the full quantity will be nested here as I nest these clusters. All right, to break a cluster, just select it. Again, on the Parts tab, Cluster, and then select Uncluster. And now these can be moved around separately. All right, let's get rid of these for now. You can also build a cluster of dissimilar parts. So let's do that now. I'll try to create a nice tight grouping here. All right, I can just use the arrow keys on the keyboard to do some bumping. And I'll bring in this part as well. All right, that looks pretty good. So we'll select all of them. On the Parts tab, select Cluster. And now it's available as a separate part in the part list. I'll remove that one, and then we can just double click to begin nesting these. And note that these can be bumped around or rotated just like any other single part could. All right, so we'll fill out this nest a little bit more. One other thing you can do in ProNest LT is move groupings of parts from one nest to another. Let's say you've done some manual nesting and you've done some work in terms of adding the parts, rotating them to fit. You don't want to have to do that work over again if you need to move the parts to another nest. So there's an easy fix for that. You can just select the parts here. Press Control A to select all of them. And we're going to move them to a different plate size. So let's say originally I nested these on a plate that was too large maybe, or they need to be nested on a different plate. Just select New Nest. This time I'm going to place them on an 84-inch by 48-inch plate. Click OK. And the parts are moved to that nest right away. So now this is the 84 by 48-inch plate. Note that when parts are selected in ProNest LT, you can think of them as sort of hovering over a nest. So they're not really nested when they're selected like this. This allows you to move them easily from one nest to another in this way. Okay, and just click to drop them down, and now they're fully nested. If I wanted to move them back, I could do Control A again to select them all, and then navigate over to the first nest and drop them down. So it's just as easy as that.